Rookie ADP inefficiencies that we do not understand. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, we got a lot of rookies going in our annual drafts that we don't know why they are going where they are. So we're going to play contrarian. We're going to explain it to each other and play dueling roles here. What's the first player or profile you do not understand in rookie drafts this year?
Malik Willis, quarterback 2 at 203. I don't understand it. Explain it to me like I'm five.
Yeah. I will explain Malik Willis to you. He is a vibrant rushing upside quarterback. And frankly, the success of Jalen Hurts from day 2, from falling in the draft, is only aiding Malik Willis. I also think people have a little bit of Alzheimer's, that they don't even remember the NFL draft happening. And all 3 of those quarterbacks landing in round 3, falling in the draft, they all went behind shaky quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill is the least shaky, so I don't understand that part of it. But I'll tell you though, Superflex, QB2, Malik Willis, early second round, yes please. Rushing upside, he can be top 5 to 10 option if he plays, and it should be soon because Ryan Tannehill is going to fall off a cliff, Jordan. So that's easy. That's an easy one, Malik Willis. What's your counter? What's your counter to that in our ADP courtroom here?
Well, what is curious to me is the arguments that we see that is like, hey, this is quarterback of the future. And I reject the idea that a team thinks about a quarterback in the 3rd round that way, right? That's the exception to the rule. We've talked about this. We talked about this on a prior episode. If there's a case for that this year, it's probably Desmond Ridder. And I still think that's a long shot, but I think if there's a case for that, the most likely person that happens with is Desmond Ridder. The other thing that gives me pause about, and I think it might have been a PFF show that I was listening to, it was a great point, which is, if you are Lamar Jackson, right? If you are one of these guys who is rushing centric to start, you're not going to get an offense crafted after you when they're paying someone $25-30 million in front of you. The person's a vet, and they pick you on late day 2 of the draft. They're just not going to make that. You're not going to spend all offseason doing that. Now, if you win a job and you're in a Jalen Hurts situation and you get a full offseason to do that, and you sort of know that's what you're planning towards, that's a different story. But the success, really the success case for Malik Willis is a rush-centric offense. What you said, a vibrant rushing quarterback, that is something that takes time to exploit. And if you're going to put him in an offense that we've seen primarily Ryan Tannehill be, frankly, a pretty good passer, depending on how you want to measure that, that's probably not a scenario where you're maximizing Willis's stock. And I don't know, I look at the difference between him and Pickett. It's like half a round. And just in terms of expectation between 1st and 3rd round quarterbacks, I mean, that's a massive, massive gap historically.
This isn't going 35-40 overall, drifting just a little bit onto day 2. This is going, every team passed twice, many teams passed 3 times. And the same teams that needed quarterback, we thought in the top 10 or top 20 of the draft might go quarterback, passed again. They had a crack for round 2 prices, and they said, no, I don't want it. No soup for you. And the other thing you said about developmental, I wanted to hit on that. I bet you that, and we see it all the time, that stories come out that when these quarterbacks or players, rookies in general, come into the building, and this is different than interviews, this is different during the draft process, that they might know within a week if they feel like they have something or not. And I'll bet you with these quarterbacks, all 3 of those guys in round 3, by December, they're going to kind of have a good feel for, do we think this is the guy? Whether or not they've played extensively until that point, their preparation, what they've seen for 6+ months in the building around the organization, I guarantee they have strong thoughts on, is this the guy for next offseason? Are we going to be aggressive in finding a replacement, an upgrade? Or do we think this is our build-around guy, an outlier to the historical probabilities of that position and where they were drafted? So I mean, this whole like, these draft shows that I hear like, oh, Malik Willis needs to sit and learn for multiple years. A, he's not going to get that chance. B, he's going to be mired in, if that's a Tyler Huntley, like, injury away backup sort of guy that's going to be relevant, but that's going to be who you are. If you settle in that zone, like you're just not going to have like a 2-year window of like, yeah, we don't really know. We're going to just kind of keep kicking the tires there. And that's why I think we're so interested in this Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo thing in the 49ers. I mean, if Trey Lance is not the week 1 starter, it kind of tells you everything that you need to know. And that's why, I mean, this is like watching a car crash, Jordan. I feel like we can talk about it every other week. Jimmy Garoppolo, the Twitter account that just is Jimmy Garoppolo still on the 49ers?
Yes.
Yes. Every day you just tweet yes right now. And that's why we're so interested in this. But really Malik Willis is the same sort of thing of like, we're going to know if he redshirts the whole year and Ryan Tannehill is either A, not really good, or B, Tennessee is falling dreadfully out of the playoff race, and Malik Willis still does not play in December or early January, I think that says everything you need to know.
Kellen Mond.
For people that want to think, oh, round 3 is great pedigree. Really? Kyle Trask, late 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Kellen Mond, 3rd round.
Right.
I mean, not everyone is Davis Mills. Davis Mills, I didn't even bring up Davis Mills. Is probably a reason people are like, oh, 3rd round is fine. Everything's fine.
Right.
The whole draft pedigree is burning around me. Everything's fine. It's not fine.
Right.
I'm saying Kenny Pickett is concerning.
Right.
And that's because you're not top half round 1. The NFL still passed on you over and over again. All right. My first one is going to be here looking at, again, the explain this to me like I am 5. Explain why over and over again, we keep doing this dance. Explain why Dameon Pierce is the latest round 4, aka day 3 running back to get the situational boost. Let's ignore profiles. Let's ignore pedigree. Let's just draft a guy that we think has a chance to win a job. And if I feel like Tyler Algier, who knows, by July could get into the same zone of like, oh, you see someone draft him at 110 and we shouldn't be surprised or blink by this. And Dameon Pierce is going early 2nd way too often. I've seen in the past week, Tyler Algier is now going mid-2nd or higher in more drafts than he was on May 3rd or 4th. Explain this to me, Jordan, the situational, race. And it's not with 305. It's not with 402. This is meaningful rookie draft capital.
I mean, the situation's wide open, right? You don't have an established player there, right? This is a clear opportunity for to fill a need, right? That's the clearest argument. The problem that I would have with that, and I know
you're countering already. You gotta sell it a little more. Sell it to me, Jordan.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, you have Rex Burkhead. You've
Dameon
got
Pierce is your
Marlon Mack was an inactive all last season. Rex Burkhead has never really been able to stay healthy.
He's an Achilles test case too.
Right, exactly. And ultimately, you're in a situation where Dameon Pierce can do a lot of everything, and it's a wide open situation. And
do a lot of everything.
Yeah, I mean, he can play in the run game, he can play in the pass game, prototypically sized, all those things. And you say there's no one in front of him to stop him. And all of a sudden you have a really viable situation in year 1, right? That would be my pitch case for them.
Yeah. Now one thing I'll say though is this is the Michael Carter theory of, let's say all those things occur. Let's say the job at some point is his, but you paid 202 or 204 or God forbid 111 for Dameon Pierce. The flip market, because frankly, you should be in the flip market. If you get this right with whatever top 18 sort of pick you're paying, and you get this right, that you're flipping for, all of a sudden you're squeezed on profit. You are absolutely squeezed because of what you paid. That differential is the key aspect. So let's rewind to Michael Carter, who I actually think Michael Carter, superior player to Dameon Pierce. So you rewind, and even at his best, I'm trying to remember, was he ever worth a first? Consistently. Not really. So so you say a superior player, and then so Dameon Pierce, if he wins it, is he going to be worth a first? And if you're paying 202 for a situational bet with minimal pedigree, and frankly, you're going to get to January and look over your shoulder immediately you are, then again, if you pay 305 for that, you have a lot of window and a lot of options. And frankly, I think both of us would be talking about Dameon Pierce a lot if he was 305, but he's not. And man, I mean, you've talked about it before. You go day 2 to day 3, you deserve every bad outcome you get.
Do you want to know what the historical odds of a 4th round running back hitting in year 1 is?
Explain it to me, Jordan. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
3%.
Yeah.
So if you want to put your eggs in that basket, that's what you're betting on. And here's the problem with that. Here's the problem with making that bet right now is you have competition coming. And we know this. Yeah. And honestly, it's coming in the form of 2023. And I know we sit out here, and this is the same thing every year. The more I play Dynasty, the more everything's the same. We sit here in May talking about how great the draft class is going to be the following year. And then we spend from January to April of the next year complaining about the draft class, right? This is what we do, right? And then we overpay for picks on the clock, right? It's the same. And then, it's the same year-long cycle, and we're just at the beginning of it.
And then in season, you get picks for relatively cheap.
Correct. Yeah, it's all the same. And so, but if you go ahead and look like at some of the guys that could be free agents next year, there's some interesting guys, right?
There is every year, Jordan. There is every year. They're coming for them. They have pitchforks. They're coming for the jobs.
Right. Here's the guys that are free agents as of right now that are scheduled to be free agents next year. Barkley, Devin Singletary, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, Damian Harris, Josh Jacobs, right? Then you look at Melvin Gordon and some of the other guys that are kind of on the next tier, but
even if you say only,
Hunt,
here's the thing: we always over exaggerate too, like assuming that free agents are gone from their team. A lot of them stay, but here's the point: even if 3 or 4 of those guys are truly out there, that should be enough to scare whoever you think is the guy in Houston. And who's to say they can sign and draft a guy? And here's the other thing. The survival rate, surviving that first offseason for these round 4 guys is about 50-50.
Right.
So even if he gets all the way to late April and early May, you're 50-50 on them drafting a guy at least the similar pedigree. And the odds are high his profile is going to be better because Dameon Pierce, here's the book on Dameon Pierce. Let's rewind to February. It was that, well, he's this big time athlete, he's prototypically sized, and he was a strong recruit. And they're trying to explain away the fact on why he didn't produce at the college level. So it was, he's going to be a strong tester, big athlete, and he was a big recruit. Well, you run 4.59 later, and basically nothing in your profile is even like at a 50% threshold level. So that's gone. So yes, he was a good recruit, but now you're talking about a middling physical profile. Where are we going with this? Brian Robinson, superior like if you want to talk about a guy that didn't produce enough, Brian Robinson went to Alabama. There's a little more excuse there. And he went higher. He made it into day 2. Like nothing is the same of those situations. And now you're saying they cost similar or Pierce is going higher. Wow. I cannot understand the Dameon Pierce part. I can draft situational guys all day in the 3rd and 4th rounds. All day. That's what you should be doing
in the 3rd and 4th round, right? It's the flip side of It's funny because what you'll see a lot of people do is they'll draft for longevity in the 3rd and 4th round, but try and take situational shots in the 2nd round. That you should do the opposite of that. You should be drafting profiles in the 1st and 2nd round, and then taking situational shots in the 3rd and 4th, because the situational shots will clear up sooner. You'll get more.
Well, they have to because you're going to churn them because you're going to be interested.
You don't want to hang on to those. You don't want to hang on to this is the Jeff Janis theory, right? You don't want to hang on to that forever because once that happens, you're eating into roster spots. You're just eating up. You're eating up odds because you're eating. You're holding on to people that can't help you, and that's not the part of the roster where you want to do that. So that would be it's distorted this year, which I think is interesting. So, but again, I've noticed too, and someone put in the chat that Brian Robinson's going earlier. The data for real draft position actually suggests he's going later. He's fallen in the past week. He's fallen basically 3-4 spots. He's right now in MFL drafts over the past week at 301. and TDP is at 305. So when you look at them, and I've had subscribers tell me that the flip side of that is true actually on Sleeper, that TDP is going at it's Ty Davis Price is going ahead of Brian Robinson in Sleeper leagues. So again, that part of that draft, you just take that. You just take those profiles, right? That is the part of the draft where you should be taking profiles. You should be making those types of bets and then taking situational bets later. I like Algier, but I like Algier at after both of those
He's
guys.
cheaper, yeah. I mean,
Correct.
that's the ordering is the key part.
Yes.
The profiles versus what am I chasing? Just something that might hit. Something that might hit in the very short term. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 104 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Want to remind you, we're just a couple weeks away. The official landing page for all show links and info is join.footballguys.com/dynasty show. We're going to be on our own platform. We're going to be on our own feed. You can find that already. We're double dipping right now, still on the Audible, but you're going to struggle to find us in a couple weeks. So make sure that you subscribe, find us. That official landing page for the show at Football Guys is the easiest way to find all of our applicable information, whether it's Twitter or your hosting platforms there for your podcast. We had a couple things on the chat here. One was from Dustin, where he was talking about, yes, you can try to obviously flip them for someone you believe in, but I've talked before. I mean, it seems like once or twice a year, I will mention it's a dangerous, dangerous game you get into when you draft someone, startup draft or annual draft in your leagues with, like, in your mind's eye, I'm flipping this guy. I'm drafting him now, but in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, my plan, my 1.0 strategy with this player is to sell them and for more than I paid. That is risky business. Because now you're drafting not for your team, not for your vision, not on what your mechanics are for pedigree and profiles and players to develop on your own roster. And if you happen to sell them, so be it. Now you are drafting for a marketplace that is of 11 other teams that might be fickle, and you still need a buyer. If that is your plan, you're looking out the side of your eye from purchase price. I hate doing that. I've done that on occasion, and that's the thing that every year I eradicate it more and more from my behavior, because it is really a bad habit, and you can end up doing it 5 times if you let it go once.
Well, that's your Naheem Hines problem, right? That's what we've dubbed that for you, because you did this with
Oh,
Naheem
that's right.
Hines like
That one
3
time,
years
yeah.
ago. And I
302, got to draft him, and I could not
I still
deal
have
that guy
Ronald
away.
Jones. I still have Ronald Jones because he fell too far in a startup, and I'll flip him at some point. And this was, I think, 3 years ago now.
Still got him.
Still got him. Same roster, same spot. Same...
You still see that guy you don't believe in, and you're like, I can't believe I have him. And even if he is more valuable, or at points has been more valuable than who you would have taken, the point is it's still not your guy for your team. That's the biggest thing. Like when people say, I really love this player, and maybe I can get him at 110 and it's at 108. I never tell them, yeah, trade back. No, if you believe in it, go for it. It's your team. You're the one that has to look at the roster and set the lineup for this year and for years. And I know this, if you miss out on a player because you got cute and that was your guy, Dynasty is for their whole career potentially. You're going to rue the day that you did that. And I always think back to a spot where it was a few years ago, David Johnson was going mid-second, maybe late second. I don't know. I usually drafted him ahead of that because he was one of my guys. And I just remember I had 112 in a league that I didn't have another pick until the late second. I was like, so this is the window. This is the pick to get David Johnson. And I had some offers to trade back, and getting cutesy would have gotten me I don't know, a future second or whatever to trade back a few spots. I drafted him. I was happy with quote unquote reaching. It worked out, but that's just one example of just get your guy. It was early, but he was my next target player. And I think that just generally, if people operate from their target list, it will do them good of well, who's my next target player? If you don't find value, if you truly have a strong take here, just take the next guy on your list.
Yeah, 100%. There's one other comment here in the chat. I just want a player that was mentioned, Hassan Haskins. You look at a situation, right? You want to make a situational bet, make that situational bet.
He's 4th round pedigree, right? I mean, but blocked. It's the Alexander Madison effect, right? He landed behind Derrick Henry, so no one cares.
He's going 401 in startup drafts. He's got 401 in rookie drafts, Superflex rookie drafts, and he has a wide open opportunity to be the backup running back behind Derrick Henry. Like you want to take a situational bet, that's the place to take
situational bet. But here's another word for it: arbitrage, right? So Dameon Pierce, I mean, the only reason he's going a full 2 rounds ahead of Hassan Haskins or thereabouts is the fact that you have an unclarified depth chart at present, and then Derrick Henry is clarified in a blocked fashion. But you know what? One injury unblocks everything, and then you can say, Dameon Pierce, the assumption that he is going to beat out even an 80% Marlon Mack, who was a reason to play him last year. Nyheim Hines has his role. Jonathan Taylor has his role. What's left? So again, we still don't know. We don't know about Marlon Mack. And Rex Burkhead, he's a pro. How old is he again? How long has he lasted in the NFL? For darn good reasons. You don't make it as a running back till, 29, 30?
Mm-hmm.
He's been in the league the entire time. It's not like he sat out for 2 years. You've got to have the goods. This is the Latavius Murray. I'm trying to think who was the other guy.
He'll be 32.
That lasted 32. So he's been largely a decade in the NFL, and he's always been around. You think a day 3 rookie is going to just walk in there and be like, step aside, Rex Burkhead. I can do many things better than you. No. The answer is flat out no. This assumption that Dameon Pierce is going to beat those guys out, he needs at least 1 injury. He might need 2. And I mean, he might be mired. That is a pick that can look ugly in week 1. Absolutely ugly. There were some good we're getting some good activity. I think it was because we started closer on time this week, Jordan. That probably helps. You have people that tune out. We start talking behind the door there. This is a good one from Mike.
Everyone's caffeinated.
I know. Everyone's like you. Mike
asked in the chat. This is great.
Mike asked, would you move on from Chuba Hubbard and trade for a lottery ticket like a Hassan Haskins? I think Chuba Hubbard is a really interesting running back injury away situation because Deonta Foreman looked legit, looked back, a couple years removed from Achilles. That is an unsettled Carolina depth chart from running back 2 and 3 perspective. Hassan Haskins could be more clarified. I would think you would still get Haskins plus. I mean, could you get that Haskins pick plus maybe a future upgrade, maybe some additional waiver dollars? And I think waiver dollars are underrated because if you got, a sub 30-man rosters, you're going to want to pay up. There's going to be some good things on the waiver wire that you want to, if you're a penny pincher like myself, you'd love to have some extra dollars to be more aggressive in a few occasions with running backs, September, October. So, I mean, I think Chuba Hubbard, Amir Abdullah made him PPR irrelevant last year. And not that Abdullah is a slouch, but I think you have to, and then they bring in Deonta Foreman. I think you have to question Chuba Hubbard, A, being clarified, and B, the upside of whatever his, if McCaffrey's out, situation is going to be. Not to turn this into like a running back centric show for us, but we can do that very easily.
We can.
But what do you think about the possibility of getting Haskins plus? I mean, they're both round 4 picks.
I mean, I like Haskins plus. I think that situation is probably better in terms of the
possibilities, right
there. So, and we've already seen Chuba Hubbard, and I think Haskins, there's a little bit more uncertainty there. And unfortunately, Tennessee
probably likes Dontrell Hilliard more than any of us do. So that's another thing. We saw that last year. We'll see if we see it again. So that could be a PPR limiter there. But if you say who's more like Derrick Henry, that's not really a competitive point at this point because Haskins is pushing 230. And definitely when you go back to Michigan, bruising power back, that's the thing he does.
It's a non-zero chance that he's a 2023 starter too. You look at the Derrick Henry contract, right. There's nothing guaranteed at any point from here until the end of it, which I believe is at the end of next year. And they could save all but I think his net cap number is 15 million, and they could save basically 12 of that next year. if he
Well, the big
we
key
saw
we've been
declines. We talked about declines that we've seen on Derrick Henry in terms of a lot of his efficiency stuff, all of his stuff after contact, the rate at which he broke tackles, yards per route run, sort of
well, just
all
a
that
bludgeoning power back of his freakish size and taking on so much contact for so many touches in such a short amount of time, and now getting to his later 20s. Historically, it should be expected.
Right. And
he's
so,
beyond his peak production window. He's
Right.
exiting that. He's coming off an injury.
Right.
And
Yeah,
if he loses a little bit off the top end explosion for his size and long speed, what does that do?
Yeah, and we began to see that last year, but it was covered up by the fact that there was a ton of volume, and so that hid, I think, some of the efficiencies. And you could say, hey, the reason that his efficiency was down because of the volume, but I do think there was some of that taken off of his profile last year that hasn't been talked about. I think we have to be careful with. So he's one that taking a deeper shot, and another place to take a deeper shot. Again, you want to take a situational shot. Take a shot at a guy like Ty Chandler, right? That situation could break open next year. And in January, you got Madison, a free agent, Dalvin Cook's a cut candidate, and a new front office with a whole lot of money that they could save. And you take a shot in that backfield, right? I would rather take those types of shots.
Or
and you don't even need to take
Kene Nwangwu, who's a 4th round pick with big time athleticism that probably is out on your wire in a lot of leagues. Or if he's not now, week 1 or at some point during the season, he can become an off-season stash player for you.
Correct.
That doesn't get a lot of run, but I think he made a few splash plays, and it was special teams, and maybe he had a smattering of touches on offense last year. But like
those
you're
are
saying,
the types of situational bets. Make bets like that in situation.
Cheap, a roster spot essentially.
Absolutely.
This is a good one. Where was it from Crack Shack? And this is actually a good point that I would like to make. He said 49ers drafted Tyrion Davis-Price in the 3rd round, so he has more value than Mitchell as a 6th round pick ? And the answer, that's not the point of that statement, in my opinion. It's that so Mitchell beat out Trey Sermon last year, so they were in the same class. I would say this though. Here's 2 key points on the timeline. Elijah Mitchell, knee surgery this offseason. Then, with knowing what they had from last year's class in Sermon and in Mitchell, what do? They draft Price on day 2. So to me, that's notable. Those 2 things, coming off of injury, splashing from day 3, should always be looking over their shoulder. He produced well, but what do? Go right back to the well with meaningful pedigree in a class where you say, you can just wait till day 3. They didn't. They did not wait till day 3. I think it's notable Washington didn't wait till day 3. I mean, these are things that you should be paying attention to with guys like Mitchell, who's been fading a little bit. Don't discount the knee injury. What if the explosion is gone by 10% in a backfield we know they like to play reindeer games? And Antonio Gibson, what does he do? He fumbles. He's got a little bit of durability issues. They bring in Brian Robinson from a big-time Alabama backfield that hasn't fumbled, and I just think he's going to be a pro's pro. Now, what upside? What does that mean? I don't know, but I know he's not going to mess it up. Whatever that upside is, he's not going to mess that up with poor assignments, fumbles, things that we've been, why is Antonio Gibson, if he just eliminated this and that, man, he could be a top 5 back. Well, he's not.
Yeah.
What if Buffalo just signed JD McKissick? I mean, what a twist, right? I mean, McKissick is gone in Buffalo. Do they draft James Cook? And now Gibson has that PPR thorn, and they drafted Brian Robinson. Man, Gibson, the roller coaster ride this offseason.
Yeah. Hey, can I pick your brain on a situation? And this is maybe adding to the beginning segment where we were talking about explain situation to me. I saw a pretty healthy debate on Twitter this past week talking about that you're basically crazy to take, or really that James White was basically this year's version of Clyde Edwards-Helaire based on landing spot. And then there was sort of a related thread, which was that Rachaad White is clearly a better pick than James Cook. And I'm curious. We haven't even talked about this. I hate to put you on the spot like this, but I'm just curious if you have a reaction to that with again, maybe it's a player where you don't even necessarily love all that much, but you end up getting the draft pedigree, and you kind of find yourself in a situation where you're like, hey, this ends up being better than I thought in a meaningfully significant way as a second round draft pick. This isn't undrafted guy going to round 5, right? This is day 2, day 3 fringe landing in round 2, right? That's a big difference. Just curious how you sort of think about him in the Clyde Edwards-Helaire conversation, as well as him versus Rachaad White, and you sort of slot the two of those situations.
Yeah, I mean, I like Rachaad White, the player in the profile, but I like him more than when I watch him. But Leonard Fournette, I mean, kind of like James Conner, he's on a window here. Like their production, and then now their newfound allegiance contractually, these are keys. This is the NFL. They're telling us. I think the Rachaad White is a damning statement on Keyshawn Vaughn more than anything. I mean, that is basically saying we need to reset the clock on this pick that has not worked out, period. So they may see Rachaad White as a potential future starter, but definitely a guy that they can view in the injury away vein that Giovanni Bernard doesn't really provide that. Keyshawn Vaughn, we haven't seen much of him, and I think part of that is because they just don't like him. I mean, I think we would have seen more from him, specifically last year, outside of we have to use him because we're down on bodies. That's the only time we've really seen him. He does not have the Brady trust. Will Rachaad White have the Brady trust? Let's see. Let's hope so. And the big difference between round 2 and round 3, first of all, day 2 running backs have a lot of allegiance. They don't get passed over quickly in terms of pedigree. But is this the third off season for Keyshawn Vaughn? I believe it is. No, second. This is the second one. I think he was a 2020. So second one, more times than not, the round 3 running back survives this. So he's an outlier. He's on the wrong side of historical probability by being challenged with another round 3 pick or higher this early. And here's what you love about round 2, James Cook here, that Zach Moss, clearly they don't like him. He's been inactives and stuff. You can say it's special teams. I'm sorry. A day 2 running back, Zach Moss in example here, should be playing and active every single week and a part of a committee. If you're not, that says something. So they're out on him. And you'll speak to this Buffalo side in a second. But Devin Singletary, as much as I like him, I don't think they view him as the answer. I think he was the best of what they had last year. And the fact that they overdrafted on top of him, he's another one. Round 3, expect by the third off season competition. That's Devin Singletary. That happened. They drafted over the top of him before his rookie contract was done. And James Cook, the reason I like him is A, late first, maybe even early second cost, palatable. And 92% of the time that round 2 guy, you don't see a round 1, round 2 pick the following offseason. So he's locked in. He is the most likely Bills starter week 1 next season. Most likely, hands down, in my opinion. If they sign somebody, sure, but almost never do they draft someone in round 1, round 2 the next year. Singletary, will he be a part of their plans? Zach Moss, I mean, we can basically count him out at this point. But what's your Buffalo take there? I mean, those historical probabilities for James Cook are strong, 76% through 2 off seasons. So this is strong stuff that's saying he has a long window, regardless of our maybe tepid thoughts on him as a player himself.
Yeah, and I don't think this isn't a franchise that's going to spend a round 1 pick on a running back. So I think you sort of have that with Cook. I think some of the profile stuff in terms of, hey, size, does he fit? I think it's a little bit. He's probably not going to get the goal line rushing anyways, because they're just going to call the quarterback's number
in the big moments, right?
And this is the funny thing that we joked about, when all season last year, Buffalo can't run the ball. Buffalo can't run the ball. I said, listen, when it matters, right, when it really matters, they're just going to call 17's number, right?
But if he gets 200 carries, which is not a workhorse featured back sort of number, but if you mix that in with some optimal looks, I mean, we saw Zach Moss be viable in the receiving game and get stuff in the red zone. James Cook can do that or more. And within this offense, that can be, I mean, you can squint your way to a top 12 PPR guy, right? Just being optimized. I mean, you could squint your way to certain touches in certain situations, and you got 8 to 10 touchdowns within this offense. You couldn't say that on every offense, but on this one you can. And so a 200-pounder, if you get if you get 50 plus receptions, you get, again, that 8 to 10 total touchdown number, you're getting there. You're in the ballpark. You're competitive for that sort of upside.
Yeah, I'm with you. And one of the things I was looking at too was when you look at the Bills offense last year, third and wide receiver routes, what happened? They lost Beasley, they lost Emmanuel Sanders, or at least Emmanuel Sanders hasn't re-signed. So that's maybe an open question. But third and routes per drop back, third and targets per drop back, second receptions per drop back.
Who's to say James Cook isn't going to be a slot proxy? I mean, I know they brought in Jameson Crowder, but
right.
I mean, who's to say James Cook is not part of that check down, easy completion, easy yardage type plan when everyone drops back?
Totally. And you look last year, I think that they wanted more out of the running back, and this is sort of speaks to what they did. 23rd in terms of routes per drop back. Again, not a huge number, but when you look, they actually produced 29th in terms of targets per drop back, right? So way underproduced the amount of routes they're running per drop back. That speaks to the fact that they just weren't very good in that aspect. And again, if you have a better option, I think that could lift in. Maybe it's more of a slot role. Maybe it's making some easy stuff for Josh Allen. I think all you add that up, I think that there's plenty of upside, and the threat of Allen in the red zone still gives you plenty of opportunities to run a smaller back, because you're not lining up 3 tight ends, a fullback, and then telling them to leap over the top, right? It's a different look that we've seen Eckler, we've seen some other guys that are smaller fit into that sort of red zone rushing role in ways that would be atypical. It's not something I'm super worried about with him. I think this offense has room for a running back in it that's pretty good. I think James Cook's pretty good. And again, you just playing base rates with these. Like, you could take a round 3 running back over round 2 running back, but this is a tough bet to make a lot, right? Like, that's something, you go back a couple years ago when we were talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus some of those other guys. I said, listen, you can do that. Like, it didn't matter because we weren't going to, you weren't going to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire where we had him on our board. But I said, you can only really rank him so low because you're making by taking other people over him, you're making a huge bet against the numbers, right? You have to recognize that is a huge bet. You can do that once, maybe you can do that twice, but you start doing that a lot, you really got to be super careful. And that's a good example of it for this year for me. And honestly, it's a massive difference between him and Edwards-Helaire in terms of prices. I mean, Edwards-Helaire is a first round startup pick.
And again, he was 101, 102.
Right. And so, James Cook's 112 in a bad class.
Well, 101, 102 in a class with Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers and Dobbins and Swift and all these guys that we were stacking up. I mean, it was a luxury of riches and profiles within that class. We're talking about a class where you get 2 running backs gone pretty quickly, and then wait for the next guy. And James Cook, in general, I've seen him go. I actually saw 102, but I've seen him go mid-first on occasion, but he's generally out there, in that late first, 110 to 202.
102 for him?
Yes, I have a screenshot to prove it. I saw.
Oh, I want that as my profile picture. I want to meet this person.
Yeah, I want to. Also in that same draft, Keontae Ingram went 106. So, yeah, I don't know if that's going to be the greatest ADP data point you want to mix in to the. You may want to eliminate the highs and lows on that one. But yeah, actually, we have one more point on this from Fantasy Typhoon. He says that Singletary will get the veteran respect, by being the starter to begin the season. But Cook is going to take over, and not look back. And he mentions week 4 or 5. But you know what? I mean, usually we've said it before that round 2 running back, mid-season, later season, that's when they start to roll. So it takes them a little time. Maybe it's a couple months, 3 months, but a lot of times that page turns over. And frankly, it's good news because it's the playoff push and the title push for your dynasty teams and getting that lineup clarity when you need it the most. And frankly, it's not September. So James Cook might be an auto start player by the time you get to the most meaningful games of your fantasy season. All right, want to remind you about following the Football Guys daily email update. You can go and get everything from Joe Bryant distilled down. You're going to get links to, now we have the combined big board that is up there for your rookie drafting purposes. The Bloom post-draft 100 has been up for a little bit of time since the NFL draft. So all the new content that you're going to see, you get links that are put out for there. You're going to get the news links. Everything you need, go up to the right side of the homepage, free email update. And that's your way to sign up from that news and all the Football Guys information you need on a daily basis this time of year. And frankly, it's like 11 months out of the year. Daily email updates from Football Guys. All right, let's cover a trade or two in rapid fire fashion here. I thought this one was interesting because anytime you have a 101 or Breece Hall involved, it's always about what is the cost involved. This is a 14-teamer with 2 tight end, super flex. You've got some premium scoring there. 105 and Brandon Aiyuk for Breece Hall and 301. So is that worth it to move down off of the assumed here 101 pivot point?
So what was it again? It was Breece Hall and 301.
Yeah, for 105 and Brandon Aiyuk.
105 and Brandon Aiyuk. And it was start 1, right?
No, it's Superflex 2 tight end.
Oh, Superflex 2 tight end. Sorry. All right. I think I'd rather have a Hall, right? I mean, I think it's as a 105 and Brandon Aiyuk. You're moving down a sizable chunk in terms of expected pedigree. You're making a bet on a receiver that hasn't really broken out yet. I think this is actually cheap for Hall.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, what do you think the range of outcomes and ultimate upside of Brandon Aiyuk is? Because if he levels off and he is a depth contributor to your fantasy team, then that is not worth the deal down. Because then you're putting a lot of pressure, as you said, on 105 to pace essentially Breece Hall. And if that, I mean, best case, I mean, I've seen circumstances where Drake London is wide receiver 2, and do you get Pickett ahead of that in a 14-team superflex? You have ways that could turn into Drake London. You have ways that obviously a round 1 drafted wide receiver can work out, but I don't think that that's a hedge that you want to make. This is turning running back into 2 wide receivers in a lot of cases, and 301. I love getting a pick like that back. I mean, it may have been a counter of, the offers go back and forth, and it's like, well, throw in 301. I like that. In a 14-teamer, I know it's 29 overall, but that's still in this format. That's a day 2 tight end if you want it to be. That we just talked about a number of interesting pedigree that could be Tyrion Davis-Price. You have a lot of options from 301. That could be a future second if you choose to trade it. So I love getting 301 back, and I wouldn't want to go through the analysis here by not talking about just adding on sometimes those later picks to a deal that's really a 2-for-1 construction.
Yeah, what's the person that's getting the 105 side thinking? Kenny Pickett and 14-team superflex? I mean, that's got to be,
if he's available, 14-team, he could definitely go top 4.
Right.
I mean, even with the premium scoring and 2 tight end, probably a little early for Trey McBride. So, but yeah, I mean, I think you're probably hoping, I think from a pedigree standpoint, maybe Kenneth Walker makes it. I mean, that's maybe possible. And you're like, well, I view them pretty similarly. And maybe maybe 101 was picked, and then you trade Breece Hall and you move down, and you're like, I got a chance at, if you view Walker similarly or Drake London similarly, you're like, I got a decent shot to get one of them at 5. So that's ways it could work out. I still think the 301 is a key piece here. All right, let's do one more here. FFPC 1 quarterback. So 109 was on the clock here, and they drafted, they traded for Justin Herbert. So what are your thoughts on the value of a cyborg, an assassin quarterback in FFPC where things are tight? You could maybe roster just 1 quarterback by doing a move like this, save a roster spot for 109. You've talked about how it's tough in 1 quarterback to get value. What do you think about that here?
I like it. And one of the reasons that I like this is because of the roster construction. You are going to be able to, presumably, if you make this deal, Herbert's your best quarterback, right? There's not very many situations in which he wouldn't be. And it allows you to, instead of carrying 2, it allows you to carry 1. Right? You can feel comfortable basically playing him out the entire season. That'll free up a roster spot, whether that's keeping 2 quarterbacks or whether it's rostering 2 of them in season. It's probably something you have to do a lot less often. So that's the aspect of it that I would that I like about the Herbert side. The flip side of it that I like is you're probably in that range drafting a day 1 wide receiver. And that's probably not helping you. You're getting some of that roster clogging stuff going on. So really what I think you're doing by doing this is maybe taking 2 roster spots, maybe even 3 roster spots that would otherwise be clogged up by this developmental wide receiver, and maybe 2 quarterbacks that you're rostering in a committee and cramming them into 1. And I like that aspect of it, especially in FFPC. You're constantly trying to churn over those spots, and every week we talk about this in season. You get a scenario where there's injury away guys that you're trying to pick between, and this is how you optimize that roster spot. So I really like this deal. Again, this is one that it can be tough to get a first round pick, but again, this is to be on the opposite side of this. This is what you get for a quarterback at start 1, a really good one, a top 5 guy. This is what you get, So again, it's tough to get a first rounder, but I don't have a problem giving this because I think it has advantages that are ancillary to just having Justin Herbert on your team.
Yeah, and I think the value when you talked about the roster spot of 1 quarterback, you save it, you don't play some platoon or committee game or feel uncertain about your starter, and now you have a second guy. If you're churning that with running backs, I really do think that could be worth that roster spot could be worth a second round pick. Because if you're thinking injury array running back, and something you're optimizing week to week on what's the best move here with the roster spot. And I think about the running backs that go in round 2 of the annual draft and some of them that go in the 3rd round, somewhere in that round 2, round 3 range, I think is the true value of that saved roster spot if you can save one through roster composition in a deal like this. The other thing I will say, and I will ask you because I honestly don't know the answer, I have a couple FFPC orphans I've had for a year or something where I still have not been able to pare down the quarterbacks other than outright cutting. Maybe that's going to be your answer. But if you've got multiple quarterbacks and let's say one of them is really good, is the move to trade your best quarterback to pare down? Or, are you shopping, Derek Carr for a 3rd? Are you outright going to cut someone eventually to save the roster spot or just spend it on a different position? What's the exit progress or plan over a 6-month period to say I'm down to 1 quarterback like a Herbert?
It's tough, right? This is the problem with it because everyone else is dealing with the same issue. And so then you ask yourself in a question like this is, are you cutting a guy like Carr? Right? Is that, does he become a waiver wire thing? And that's maybe, but again, we were having this debate internally about a guy like Carr and the Watson discussion. How much does he really offer you? And what's the difference between Carr and quarterback 20? Right. And if that's going to be a once, maybe twice a season type of difference, I'll just roll with the waiver wire guy. Right. And then, but it's a tough situation. It's back to the exact scenario we were talking about earlier, where it's the Naheem Hines problem. It's a Ronald Jones problem, right? Where you're stuck with a guy that's de-optimized because you don't want to sort of cut him loose. It's
this goes back to you got to be really careful in the annual draft, right? If you rewind 12 months and you say, well, this team drafted Trey Lance, then you created this situation. Right. Now you created this situation if Trey Lance was great, if he turned into Lamar Jackson and he was dynamic and high upside and all this stuff, then that was the right play. But you need to exit from other options, and now Trey Lance is your guy. So he can either be the answer or he can be part of the problem. And that's why you can write. And honestly, 30 roster spots, we're not having this conversation.
Right.
But 20, you get squeezed from all sides at all times. It's a turtleneck that's 2 sizes too small, and you just at all times are having trouble breathing. And the having trouble breathing is you just look at the waiver options starting in late August all the way through the season, and you cannot play keep away with enough players. If you don't play redraft, it's the equivalent of redraft. There are injury away clarified. There may be a streaming running back the week of available because of what happened 48 hours before on Sunday. And you can't stop it. You cannot stop it. You literally can make 3 or 4. These are my optimal highest upside guys, but it's not like their odds of getting the injury are any better than some of the guys that are on the waiver wire that week. That's how you have to break your ties. So that saved roster spot is super important. All right. The quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum this week. This is one of my last ones from Don't Become Your Parents. This was the one that really hit home as a newfound single family homeowner. I'm sure you can relate to this. I was 32 and deep in the mulch game. Like, whoever wrote this needs to be like in the commercial writing Hall of Fame. This may be the best one. Deep in the mulch game. Who has ever said that phrase? It's so good.
It is good.
And if you've ever, you've got a little cul-de-sac, I believe. And then, I've got these, this little neighborhood of like, maybe it's like 100 homes or something, but like you walk around, or you bike around, or however you venture and see neighbors' yards or whatever. And it's just like, there's Tom putting in some new mulch. Like you make comments about stuff internally that you would never do it otherwise. When all of a sudden you're like, I got a yard, he's got a yard. Hey, let's talk yard. Like,
yeah.
Have you ever been too deep in the mulch game?
I had a neighbor stop when this must have been a couple of years ago. I think we've owned our home for, it's 5 years already. That's incredible. So this must have been 3, maybe 4 years ago. And I had done a whole bunch of stuff out front, cut down a whole bunch of bushes. I had worked a couple of years to try and get the front of our house cleaned up. And I was outside one day and older guy, neighbor stops by and he goes, "Hey, you got to do me a favor." I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "You got to stop working on your lawn. My wife's giving me a hard time about me getting out there and doing it." I was like, "This is
that guy's out. Why can't you do it?"
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
It's a rising tide situation. We're all going to better our house and up our property values here.
There's way too many old and lazy people here in Florida that just have the landscaping services that almost no one would say what you just said. Most people say like I actually had someone come by today. I was out there, trimming a bush and doing a few cleanup things and not 5 minutes into, hey, I'm the neighbor, I know you're new and all that kind of stuff. And we start talking about that stuff and it's like, we got this landscaping service. Oh yeah, we just they're really good, weekly, and then in the winter, it's like a couple times a month or something. It's like so here it's all about the they try to pressure you. It's like I always try to mow my lawn. I always try to mow the lawn when the mowing service is across the street doing the other lawn. Be like, yeah, I'm not like those people. I'm doing it myself.
Yeah. I can beat them.
Yeah. And especially you even went like, I think you actually raised your eyebrows when you were like, you got a manual lawnmower. You're like, you're a monster. What's the matter with you? Like when I told you that, you're like, technology that makes this a heck of a lot easier. But like, I love just throwing it in the face of the guy that he spends 3 minutes and he makes God knows how much off the neighbors. And it's like, I'm doing this right next to you. It's really not hard.
Right.
And just be like, don't even ask. I actually want him to come up to me someday and ask me. And I just want to glare at him. No answer. I'm just going to glare at him.
Yeah.
I'll be like, you could make $50 more if you just sign me up. You're here anyway, and you're not. I wonder if he would like just, poison my lawn or something. Like, you need help. You need help with your lawn. Can't figure it out. All right. So back to football. Davante Adams will most likely die on your roster, but if you are competing, that is okay.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a certainty that he'll die on my roster, but I'm fine at this point. Playing him out, right? I'm fine, and I don't think you're going to get a lot of like future first action from him at this point.
Well, I was going to say his cost, his market value right now is what? Give a general. Is it a first plus? Is it a naked first if it's mid or higher? Like what do you think it is?
It's going 309 in startups, so that should draw that should be
top
in
6 or 7 pick, right?
Say that again.
Top 6 or 7 rookie pick.
Yes, I would think
Okay.
so.
So let's play this out. Let's say you're a contending team, you're in the mix, whether you win or not, whatever. Let's get to next offseason. Is a late first still in play? He'll be what, 30? It'll be his 30-year-old season, I believe, in 2023. So is a late first still possible, you think?
I think it should be. Yeah, I think so.
But the point is it drops. And then guess what? The
Right.
next offseason, you're talking something in the mid to later second round, I would imagine, at 31. We're just kind of playing this out. And my point of this is saying it's going to keep dropping, and you're probably not going to validate on your contending team to sell him as the price drops if he is still a starting lineup viable player for you.
Right.
And if he falls out of a starting lineup viable player, then his market value craters anyway, to the point of you saying you're probably just going to be in on the depth because you're like, well, I'm not trading Davante Adams for a third.
Yes. Yes. So a couple of super flex trades that I saw for him. Davis Mills in 111, which seems light. Then you, on the flip side of that, you get a first, a third next year, and 308 this year. If I'm going to deal him, I'd rather do that type of deal because I think you're getting, at least you're getting the future pick, and maybe you can pair those thirds and get Brandon Cooks, something in that sort of vein, and you can sort of try and replicate a non-Rodgers linked Adams, right? That's, I think, kind of what you're trying to do, and take that. That would sort of be where I would look to go. But otherwise, I mean, there's another one for him and Terrace Marshall for a first, him for 103 this year. Just start looking around.
See, at least 103. Here's what I'll say: if you get high enough, there is some, like, I remember for a decade there was this premise of, you get the big time receiver when they get to about 28 or so, 29, they still have peak value, and if you flip that to the next guy, like, could that be a year ago? You flip it for an incoming Jamar Chase. You take a shot on a potential big time profile that could work out. I remember this was back in the Dez Bryant, you flip something for Dez Bryant when he was incoming, or it's some guy gets to 28, you try to get Calvin Johnson when he was an incoming rookie. Like, it can work out in that fashion. And so if you take your shot at, 103 Drake London, you're like, well, I'm flipping to a top 10 pick with a quality profile and I'm restarting the clock. And obviously you could flame out in a tremendous fashion anytime you go for proven profile, and now you're just taking a shot on an incoming rookie. That could flame out in epic proportions. So, but it could also work out where you reset the clock and now you have another top 25 dynasty asset for the foreseeable future that Adams is now exiting. So yeah, it can work out. All right, we got one more here. 23 first for 202 seems like a horrible decision to me.
Which side of that seems like I would take the first.
Well, yeah, no, I think they mean trading into 202.
Oh yeah, that's a bad decision. I agree with them. That's terrible. I mean, the general rule that I would have, top 30 or so is kind of the line of where you want to deal a future first for the player, and that 202 is Jahan Dotson, whatever. Like, even I might like Jahan Dotson.
But if you're not planning on contending, or you're pretty far away, I mean, you hold the pick, and if you're contending, you don't trade into 202. You would trade that for something. I mean, we just mentioned you can get Davante Adams maybe. So get something that helps you competitively in a major way.
100%.
All right. Big discussion when we started talking about inefficiencies in rookie draft ADP. We also got going a little bit on running back roundup here for about 15-20 minutes. That could be 3 hours if you know either one of us very well at all.
If you know, you know.
A little bit. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, you don't. But someday you might. We talked a little bit about Breece Hall and pivoting within rookie drafts. Justin Herbert. If we get a nice one quarterback trade, that's always a productive one to talk about team building concepts. And that was a productive one in FFPC. And then closing out, talking about some rookie picks and talking about the erosion of elite players like maybe Davante Adams in the trade market. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty League.